Okay. So this is Dean and Kaylene, and for those who are new here, they have been part of our mission outreach into Africa. They've worked in Sudan and Cameroon and about 10 other African countries, so they know a lot about Africa. So it's lovely to have you here today. Thank you.
Actually, the more we go, the less we know about Africa. It's wonderful to be back. I'm just going to have a wee squeeze. Hi, Tip. How many of you know us from... Oh, yes. See, it is coming home. Great. Okay, firstly, hi to those who are unable to be here but are watching us. I promised a wave. Where's the camera? To Peter, if I could. And for Brian Carey, Anne Higley and Colleen Bell, who are among those who have faithfully supported us for over 20 years. Hi to you.
It's lovely to be back here, and in our prayer time this morning, to hear prayed that we're welcome to come home. And that's very much like it is. It's lovely to see familiar faces still. And we mourn with you the loss of a couple of those familiar faces in the last couple of weeks with Peter and Dudley and Alison. Our hearts are with you this morning. And you guys have done your own various kinds of mission, Dudley and Alison. Mission has many faces, doesn't it? And we've seen some of those faces this morning in Bangladesh and in China. And the mission that we work with, we use helicopters and aircraft. Mercy Air's mission statement says, Mercy Air facilitates spiritual and physical relief by collaborating with like-minded partner organisations who serve remote communities that are best accessed by aircraft. So a quick history for those who don't know us. Taupo was home to Kaylene and myself and our 4 kids. That was our little gaggle when we came home after our first 8-year mission venture in Africa. We started out in Sudan flying relief. In the big 1985 famine that many of you will remember, kind of made well known by Bob Geldof and Band-Aid. We then had a few years in Cameroon, in West Africa, where 3 of our 4 kids were born, and then a year in war-torn Ethiopia, before returning to New Zealand to make Taupo our home for 7 years until 2001. I worked with the local rescue helicopter as pilot and engineer, and Kaylene taught at Hilltop School. We were on the leadership team here at Taupo Baptist, involved in worship, mission committee, and kids club. It was a great place for us to bring up our kids. We loved our season of life here. We then moved to Christchurch, where our kids finished their schooling, chose their life path with a few wobbles along the way, and they have now all morphed into different fields, married, had children, and this is now our mob.
We have 10 grandchildren.
She just had to fit that little bit of skite in there.
Yeah.
Once they were independent, Kaylene and I decided to go back to Africa and give a few more years there. Singer Joan Baez said, "You don't get to choose how you're going to die or when. You can only decide how you're going to live." So in 2013, we went back to Southern Africa this time to work with Mercy Air, a mission humanitarian organisation. They're based in the northeast corner of South Africa on a little farm airstrip there, and flying into surrounding Mozambique and Swaziland. Oops.
Much of the work we do in Mozambique is out on the Zambezi River Delta, where there's an estimated 40,000 people living in isolation, cut off from roads and civilization by these meandering waterways and their croc-infested waterways. Mozambique is mostly very flat. So we work with a number of different missions and NGOs and government departments, taking primary health care to these villages, where some very interesting diseases show up. And due to their isolation from hospitals, they never get treated. YWAM, whom we partner with there, coordinate a lot of this medical work. And they also have some successful church planting and discipleship ongoing. There's also education work, which I am involved in, and agricultural development. In 2016, we started a new outreach in neighbouring Swaziland, which is now officially called Eswatini, with this eye surgeon, Dr. John O'Pons. Since then, thousands have had their eyesight restored, either with cataract surgery or glasses. Some, of course, are beyond help. This dear old blind Gogo. This program is so successful that Mercy Air is now establishing a permanent base there, with Sam, our new pilot, his wife Isabel, and their 2 kids. Now, finishing Sam's orientation for his flying and country orientation was Dean's last job there in February of this year. He's done himself out of a job, which we should be doing.
Now for some new material since we were last here. In 2019, the week after we last visited you, Mozambique was hit by a massive cyclone called Idai. We abandoned our North Island trip and I went back to help with disaster relief work for a month. Extensive flooding covered hundreds, probably thousands of square kilometres because Moz is such a flat country. Crops were wiped out and 1,600 people died. Thousands of people spent 3 or 4 days stuck up trees trying to escape the waters. There were reports of grannies and small children falling from their tree retreat from sheer exhaustion, lost to the floodwaters. The coastal city of Beira was absolutely pummeled. Oops. That, oh well, we'll stay there. Yeah, this was one of the hangars where we sometimes keep the helicopter en route to going up to the Zambezi Delta. All the aircraft inside it were just smashed, destroyed. So Beira Airport became the centre of relief activities for the next month, and helicopters and aircraft converged on it from all over the world. I was assigned a location 150 kilometres inland, which had been badly affected, and supplied them with relief, food and shelter. Many people lost everything. Mud brick houses can't survive being submersed in water for days. You can see on the wall of the school the high tide mark where the water level reached, 11 metres above the river. And this wasn't just a narrow river valley, this is across several kilometres. Then last year I flew with Joel, our other young pilot, to Lesotho to start exploring a new program there in conjunction with MAF. Lesotho is another little landlocked country within South Africa. It's barren, it's beautiful, and it's very mountainous, rising up to 11,400 feet. The people are resilient in this high, cold, and windy land. The Lesotho government has done an amazing job of setting up dozens of health centres up in the mountains. Some of these have no road access and are dependent on the network of airstrips and MAF to supply, staff, and provision these hospitals. We quickly discovered why the medical staff were so enthusiastic about the helicopter. Many of the nurses are terrified when trekking by horseback to outlying clinics. The terrain is steep and dangerous. What normally takes them more than 6 hours by horse to get to these clinics, which they do on a regular basis, we flew them in 6 minutes in the helicopter. This enabled them to go to the outlying clinic, do a full day's work, and get back home again. And they do this several times a month. Their productivity increased more than tenfold, and they also enjoyed what they were doing. I learned more about going with God's heart, which is your motto for your mission month, from some of these guys. Dr. Justin in the back there, gem of a guy, a skilled surgeon in his past. He set aside the opportunity for a life of relative luxury and has chosen instead to serve the people in the mountains, in these small health centres and even smaller village clinics. And he does this through the Lesotho Flying Doctor Service. A keen Christian, he told me once in conversation, when I consider what Jesus has done for me, isn't this the least I can do? Proverbs 14:31 says, if you oppress poor people, you insult the God who made them. But kindness shown to the poor is an act of worship. And this was his act of worship. And this guy, Ladimo, he loves doing these horseback treks. He's also a keen Christian, and he finds his God-given purpose fulfilled amongst these mountain people as head nurse at the Leber King Health Centre. It was his enthusiasm and persistence with the government departments that convinced them of the immeasurable help the helicopter would be in their work in the mountains. And yes, this is Ladimo standing in the snow up in those same mountains. It proved to be so worthwhile that now Mercier is considering setting up a permanent base there, with Joel and Sarah keen to head this up. Philip, with his wife Sarah and kids, has taken over the role of engineer. I've pretty much done myself out of another job. With Kaylene and I in our late 60s, it's time to hand over to a younger generation. All these people are going with God's heart to serve people in these out-of-the-way places.
When we first went out to mission as a young couple to Sudan to fly famine relief, we had a 14-month-old toddler and I was very pregnant. And we never imagined we'd still be going 39 years later as grandparents of 10. Just got to get that in there again. So why do we keep going back? There's a verse of a song by Brooke Taylor, Fraser, that always touches and challenges me. And it says, Lord, open up my eyes to things unseen. Show me how to love like you have loved me. Break my heart for what breaks yours. God has broken and reshaped our hearts many times in Africa. Africa gets into your heart and it doesn't let you go, and you can't forget it. It's easy to quote huge statistics about African poverty, child-headed families, HIV infection rates, or rape in South Africa. But it all seems too big, too much, too difficult, too remote. But each of those statistics has a name. Let me share a couple of these stories. I was privileged to work in a clinic in South Africa called Elroy. It takes its name from the name that Hagar gave to God when she was banished to the desert with her son Ishmael. Elroy meaning the God who sees me. And when we feel most vulnerable, forgotten, and invisible, we can remember God sees us. And so as we offered medical help, financial help, food, prayers, we would remind our patients of this. God sees you. Let me share a story with you. This little girl is called Confidence. She has a name, dreams, hopes. She was a little girl born with spina bifida, so severe that her little legs were twisted and her feet faced backward. When she was born, her mother Daphne was given the awful choice: give up your daughter or give up your husband. Daphne chose her daughter, Confidence. Confidence was 4 when I met her, and on flat ground, she would drag herself along on crutches. There wasn't much flat ground in Msholozi Township, no paved roads or footpaths. Most of the time, Daphne would strap Confidence on her back and carry her, especially up the steep hill to their tiny house. Confidence loved to sing songs from church, and she could dance in her limited way. She was a smart little girl, and she was very eager to learn. But her mother was struggling to get her enrolled in a school. The education department wanted to send her far away to a residential school for intellectually and physically impaired children. Local schools refused to take her because of access, and it was too and because access was too difficult, or who was going to change her nappy. Our team at Msholozi worked with Daphne. We had some very determined women who are strong advocates for the vulnerable and the invisible. And eventually, we got her into a kindergarten. Now, Confidence was undeterred by the flight of steps up to her classroom. She would drag herself up and bounce her way down. Confidence thrived. And for a year, we dared to dream of what her future could be. She would be well prepared to start the next year at primary school. When we left South Africa in February 2019, Confidence had not been accepted into a primary school. So her mother Daphne started homeschooling Confidence in her church building, along with other forgotten children who were denied access to school. What an amazing, compassionate heart for local mission God placed in this woman. Confidence was beginning to get infected pressure sores on her feet. She was also getting heavier for Daphne to carry, and a wheelchair was not always a viable option on the uneven ground of Msholozi. Top-class orthopaedic surgeons were consulted free of charge, bullied by some of our strong women. Daphne was facing an agonizing decision of having to consent to amputation of Confidence's legs in order to fit prosthesis in the hope of giving her some mobility. It would be a number of operations, and the clinic team needed to upgrade her house to a concrete floor from dirt and a tap inside to make the post-op care possible. One night, Confidence became extremely unwell, with high temperatures and headaches. Daphne called an ambulance, but heavy rains had washed away roads, and there was no access to their little house. Daphne tied Confidence on her back, and she negotiated the rain, the mud, the slippery hill to meet the ambulance. By the time Daphne got to the ambulance, Confidence had died. Daphne was heartbroken. Our hearts were broken. God's heart was broken. But he saw Confidence, and I believe she is now singing and dancing in a perfect body in God's home. Was it all in vain? Well, Confidence touches the hearts of people all around New Zealand and the world as we tell her story. She taught us what courage, resilience, and to be joyful in all circumstances looks like. And her mother Daphne, her heart is mending slowly, And last time I saw her, she was back helping at Imshalozi Clinic, helping her community and letting God open her heart to care and show compassion again. I feel extremely humbled and honoured to work with these amazing local women in South Africa. The past 10 years have been the richest of my life. They have taught me so much about serving and God's heart for the poor, the widows, the orphans, the prostitutes, and the lepers, the sick, which make up their communities. It's not about the poverty, it's about the strength of these women and what they've shown me. One more name. Francesca is a strong, jovial woman in her mid-30s from a small village in Mozambique. She'd be horrified if I'd made her a star. She's part of the YWAM team. She has a very limited education. She's been twice widowed. And I honestly don't know how she manages to feed and clothe her children because there's no government benefits. But she's forever cheerful, always looking for ways to serve her people and share Jesus with just this boundless energy. She's a great example of the quote, "You can't wait until life isn't hard anymore before you decide to be happy." Francesca has been part of my education team for 10 years. We know little of each other's language, but we interact freely together. We teach with laughter and empathy. In our last flight, we left the others to teach the children and sort out the waiting mothers. The women in these villages are the hardest working, but they're mostly the invisible members of these tribal villages. Together, we encouraged, coerced these mothers into an impromptu lesson to grow their meagre education and to make them feel valued. The final flight of our outreach, this was last October, was to a small village. Francesca and Elisa, who's the YWAM director, went to help an old man. He was bedridden. His hut was disintegrating, and he was severely infected with scabies and sand fleas. Elisa and Francesca washed his body, washed his bedding, shaved his matted and infected hair, cooked his meals. They were God's big heart in action with their own big hearts. And God didn't need Francesca to have a medical degree, a teaching qualification, or attendance at a theological institution to show his heart. He just needed Francesca's heart. She got it. She knew she could be God's feet and hands.
I love these symbols that you've got here, the cross and the globe and the compass. The cross is your purpose. The globe is your opportunity. And the compass, not many people know how to use the compass very well these days. The compass may reliably point to north, but when you're flying, with changes of wind direction, weather and mountains, you can't usually fly in a straight line. Modern GPS, however, regardless of how useless your navigation may be, can direct you to within meters of your destination. But you might say the Bible is more like a compass than a GPS. It gives us direction, but it doesn't tell us exactly where we are at the moment. It points reliably to north, that is, it points us to God, but it doesn't allow for all the crosswinds and the weather that we may encounter along the way. And like a compass, it takes years of experience using it to navigate life well. I understand you've got a group heading off on a mission trip soon.
To Fiji. I hope you make it. Last time when we were here, we were going on a Fiji trip with Ken and Miriam, and there was a coup, and we never made it. We made it to the airport.
But we want to encourage you to grab not just the opportunity for adventure, but the opportunity to serve people and to learn from them. Our pictures and stories may look and sound a bit glossy, but they are very rushed, and they don't tell you the frustrations and the disappointments that are also part of our story. Anticipate these. Expect them, anticipate them, and know that you can grow in your relationship with God and understanding people through those experiences. There's a big difference between being tasked with a mission and having a heart for mission. God's sovereignty doesn't negate our responsibility. It empowers it. Trust God to do what you can't. Obey God and do what you can. In closing, I'd just like to pray for your mission team. If they're in here, do you guys want to stand up just to be identified? Oh, cool. Some young blood. Good. Yeah. Well, Lord, thank you so much for this huge world of opportunity, this globe which shows us how many places are unreached. Lord, I ask for this team as they go, that they will experience this, open up my eyes to things unseen. Show me how to love like you have loved me, and to break my heart for what breaks yours. Please, Lord, empower them. Please give them not just opportunity to serve others, but to learn from them and to experience by the power of your Holy Spirit what they can do in Jesus' name. Thank you. Amen.